Most captains suck, and it very well could be the reason why your team doesn't perform as well as they can. Many young players think that just because they're called a captain or they have the armband right, they are automatically a leader on their team and think that they can lead their team. While the reality is, just because you are called a captain, because you have the armband, doesn't necessarily mean that you are a leader for your team or you're the right leader for your team. It's one thing to be called a captain, it's a whole other thing to be the true leader on your team. In this video, I'm going to explain a brief breakdown of the differences between bad captains and good captains and how you can show yourself to your coaches that you are the true leader on your team and that you deserve the armband. So there's many different types of captains. You might have a captain that is a bit more reserved, a bit more quiet, and then you might also have a captain that is a bit more outspoken, more extroverted, right? Carry a bit more bravado with them. Two big examples, Messi and Ronaldo. Messi is a bit more quiet, more introverted, more reserved as a captain, but still shows strong leadership. Whereas Ronaldo is definitely the more cocky captain, right? But despite, his confidence, his ego, he still provides good leadership for his team. Hold up. Right. So like I said, there's many different types of captains, and so there's many different captains to watch and study. Some of my favorite captains to study are Gundogan, who is a more recent player. He was recently a captain for Man City and Germany. I think in the modern game, he's a great captain to study and a very underrated player and captain to study. If we're talking about legends, though, then I think Maldini and Puyol are two of the greatest captains to ever play the game, right? And if you watch their leadership and their body language, their communication on the field and their highlights and how they carry themselves on and off the field, it's leadership. That's really what made these sort of players, legends, is they led their teams to victories, to many trophies. And that really is what a captain is supposed to be, the true leader on the team that can guide their team, whether they're facing an easy opponent or a very difficult opponent. They lead their team, they set the standards and live by those standards and guide the team to the desired result that they want to achieve. So some common traits with some bad captains are they let their egos run wild. They believe they deserve special treatment, often because oftentimes with teams is they'll have the star player, which often is a prima donna sort of player, that has a big ego, and because they're the star player, they're a captain. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the best leader, and often these are the captains that fail as leaders on their team because they can't relate and communicate and guide the team to meet the right standards and achieve desired results. Why? Again, they don't have the skills to communicate the standards expected with their teammates. And because they have egos, they're often quick to blame their teammates and do not have positive body language. They're quick to complain. They don't carry good body language. They don't communicate in a positive manner. Doesn't mean they can't criticize their team, right? But there is a difference between constructive criticism and, belittling your team. And often a bad captain doesn't know the difference. Whereas with good captains, they're in control of their ego and balance it with humility. Good captains are often some of the most humble players on their team, right? They know sometimes they have an ego, and they know how to switch it on when needed in the game, but they're always humble and they never put themselves on a pedestal above their teammates. They always see themselves and their teammates as equals. Because they see themselves as equal, but they're in a position of leadership, they will often take on the biggest burdens and responsibilities for their team. They'll not only communicate standards, but they lead by example and lift up their team to meet those standards. And that's one of the biggest differences, is a bad captain will enforce standards on their team, but they themselves might not lead by example according to those standards, right? They tell their team, do this, do this, do this. But then my question is, do they follow those standards themselves? A lot of times they don't. They push orders onto their teammates, but they often aren't the perfect example of the standards that they are speaking to their team, which makes it bit hypocritical at times. It's hard to respect a leader that gives out orders and talks about standards, right? But they themselves aren't the perfect example of those standards. Often this leads to, poor communication, poor chemistry, and it could also lead to complications, with the team trying to relate to the coach and what the coach's standards are, right? Because a good captain, and I'll mention this later on, is meant to bridge the gap between the coach and their standards and what they want and the players, the team, right? Because they're leadership and they understand they're in a position of leadership, they take full ownership over everything that happens on the pitch. Every mistake, every loss, they take full ownership. They're the captain, they're the leader, right? So if the team fails, they fail, and they recognize that fully. And their body language shows composure and confidence. They're not complaining, they're not belittling. Sometimes they might be angry, right? They might be pissed off, but when the team needs it, they can show confidence and composure for the team and keep the team mentally sharp and focused on achieving the win. They don't let their emotions get the best of them, which would only hurt the team. All right, so here's two examples of some players that I think, one of them being a good example of a bad captain, another one being an example of a good captain. I think a bad captain that you can watch right now is Bruno Fernandes at Man United. I think one of the reasons why Man United are struggling is Bruno Fernandes is a poor leader for his team. If you watch him play and you watch his body language and how he communicates, he's often quick to complain and doesn't really uplift his team. He complains to his team. He complains to the coaches, the refs, right? His body language doesn't show humility or confidence. It shows ego and it shows immaturity because he complains about every little thing. Whereas a good captain, they take responsibility, right? They take responsibility for everything, whether they win, whether they lost. When they win, they show praise to their teammates. And when they lose, they are the ones that take responsibility for the loss. And I think a great example of a captain that knows how to control his team and how to communicate effectively is Manuel Neuer. He keeps his team calm and controlled even under pressure, right? And this is a big difference between Fernandes and Neuer. Is Fernandes doesn't keep his team under control because he's complaining and all that. It builds stress and hurts the focus of his team, which often results to a lot of losses for Man United. Whereas Neuer, while he can get be full of energy, right? He can be angry, right? Oftentimes is for good reason, and he knows how to control his emotions effectively in order to best communicate with his team. And oftentimes, he is humble, he is in control, and he knows how to calm his team down and keep them controlled, which often results for a lot of wins for Bayern. I think over the history of the club, he's been a huge reason, and him and his leadership have been pinnacle for why Bayern have been such a dominating force, both domestically and in Europe, as opposed to Manchester United. So again, to elaborate this point, right, a good captain leads by example, right? They don't just talk to their teammates and speak about standards. You got to meet this standard, this standard. They actually show standards, right? They lead by being the example of the standards they want to set, that the coaches want to set for the team. So a big one is when it comes to training, they're always the first ones to show up to the pitch, right? Right? Always the first ones to show up. They're not last. They don't just show up when half the team's there. They're the first ones to show up and to greet every single teammate that enters the locker room before training. They're always the last to leave. Their captains, again, have to lead by example. And a part of that is going above and beyond what the rest of the team does. They have to be the ones that put extra time on the pitch training, extra time in the gym, do the extra hours for match analysis. They always have to go above and beyond what the minimum standard is to raise the bar for the rest of the team. That's why they have to be the first to show up and the last to leave. And then they also help, do small things as well, right? Help put away equipment after training. From my experience, this is a small way to build respect with the coach, is help the staff take care of equipment, take care of the balls, right? The hurdles, any cones, all that is a small way to show that you care and that you are here to put an effort and contribute to the team and to create a good environment for the team in training. All right? I said they set the standards for the team, not just the coaching standards, but their own standards. But again, they have to lead by example, right? It's one thing to talk about standards, another thing to live them and to train by your own standards. And a good captain trains and plays by their own standards and the standards of the coaches, which then imprints on the team. Because if the captain lives by his own standards and he leads by those standards, that's going to imprint on his teammates, and his teammates are going to take on the same standards, and all around, that's going to raise the level of that team. All right, so next one, and this is a very important one that most players don't understand. In youth level, from what I have found, very few players actually know how to communicate or even communicate at all. Most players don't even communicate at all, right? Let alone knowing how to communicate effectively. And this is very true from captains, both, in USA, rather in Europe. A lot of young captains struggle with how to communicate effectively with their team. So, with communication, they never tear down teammates. They always uplift their teammates. Doesn't mean they don't criticize a teammate, right? If they make a mistake, doesn't mean they don't coach, they don't help, they don't criticize, right? But there's a way to do that positively and not negatively. And a bad captain will always tear down the player. They'll belittle the player. They'll be tough on the player, but in a negative tone. Whereas a good captain knows how to convey the same criticism, but in a positive tone to actually help the player. If you're a captain and if you're positive with the team, then the team will be positive with each other. And a captain is a very important key to building good team chemistry and building a good team environment, because good team chemistry and a good environment helps you win games. And to foster a good environment, the captain needs, again, back to this big point of they lead by example, right? They are the leader. If you are positive with the team, then the team will be positive with each other. And together, you guys will create and maintain a very strong, very positive and productive environment, both on and off the pitch, whether it's in training or it's in matches. If your communication is constantly complaining, then this will rub off on the team and hurt on-field chemistry. So the inverse of positive criticism and all that, like our second point was, if you're constantly complaining and you're letting your ego control you, your ego, shows itself on the pitch, right off the pitch, you complain about teammates, you belittle teammates, you get on your teammates, but in a very negative manner. This is going to create a very negative team environment, right? And I've seen both of these where I've seen good captains foster a great team environment. And I've been on teams with bad captains that fostered a very toxic, very negative environment. And the two things I saw was the good captains that fostered a good, positive environment, we ended up winning more. We ended up playing better as a team. Whereas the teams I've been on with bad captains, oftentimes we've lost a lot against teams that actually did have the good chemistry. And the common denominator came down to the captains and their leadership. And then the last point here is a good captain can balance positive leadership with still maintaining high standards for the team. Like I said, a good captain will still get on a player. He'll still criticize a player, but he does it in a productive and positive manner to build the player up so the player can learn, not to tear him down. So this next point I think is very underrated, but very important point, because before, just about any player can talk to an official, to now where only the captain can talk to an official. And this rule change is going to be very important for future captains, especially for you if you're looking to be a captain, right? Knowing how to talk to officials and knowing how to control your team around the official, even when the call is wrong or debatable. So some points that I've learned from my experience is never insult or argue with a ref. You're never going to win an argument with a ref. You're going to commit dissent, which is going to lead to possible cards. If you do want to make an argument to the ref, frame your argument in the form of a question. Why? Because you're never going to change the referee's mind on the call. Once they make the call, oftentimes they're going with the call, and you're not going to change their minds. Because odds are you're probably playing a lower level league with refs that aren't going to be as good. There's no VAR. Once they make that call, they're sticking with it. You're not going to win that argument. All you'll be doing is committing dissent and risking a card for your team. The best thing you can do is ask for clarification on the call. A good ref should be able to give you a clear explanation for why he made the call. That's all you can really ask for. Is just ask for an explanation and try to understand. And even if you still disagree with it, you just got to move on. Because like I said, you will never, ever win an argument with a ref. So it's just not even worth it. Like I said, if you don't agree, let it go. So ask for clarification. You can have questions with the ref. A good ref should be able to explain their call, but if you still don't agree by that point, then you have no choice to let it go. You have to be able to know how to talk to the refs on behalf of your team and control your team around the refs to avoid cards for dissent. Another big point for a good captain is, we talked about earlier in the video, was responsibility and knowing how to take responsibility for everything that happens, right? So there's a good quote by Steven Gerrard. And this quote is, "It's difficult for me because it means so much. I take full responsibility. I have to deal with it. That's football." And this quote is very important because, and I like it because it shows a huge player from back in the day really take ownership for the team and put that loss on his shoulders and take the responsibility on half of his teammates. He can belittle his teammates. He can put the blame on them. But no, he takes responsibility for himself. He takes on that burden, right? And this is a sign of a really good leader. So if we break down this quote, he says, "It's difficult for me because it means so much." Because this was a 2-0 loss to Chelsea back in 2014. He cares about his club, and because it means so much to him, he takes full responsibility. He loves his club so much that he'll take on responsibility for the loss that him and his team had, because he loves the club so much, right? And kind of the last thing he says is, that's football. I mean, that is the truth. You win some, you lose some, but a good captain knows how to praise his team when they win and take on responsibility when they lose. So, with this quote and with Steven Gerrard and his career, there's some good points, take away in terms of responsibility, right? Never blame teammates or coaches. Always look at yourself first. Ask yourself what you can do better. And that's the big thing, is you don't complain about what the team did. You always ask yourself, what can I do better? What can I do that can potentially change the outcome? That's a much better way of thinking than just blaming your teams, right? Take responsibility, figure out what you can do to help the team. And then take full ownership over what happens on the pitch. You'll win the grace of your teammates, which is very important, because if you can win the grace of your teammates, you win their respect. And the way to do that is you have their backs after losses, right? You uplift them after losses. You take on the responsibility for them. If you do this, their respect for you. And a important thing as a captain is to have the respect of your team. Good captains earn the respect of their teammates every single day. Bad captains, they don't care. And because of that, it breeds poor team chemistry, it breeds disrespect, and it leads to more losses. One element of being a captain and being an effective captain is you have to be the bridge between coaches and the team. You have to maintain positive relationships with both coaching staff and teammates, be the mediator between both parties, communicate to coaches the needs of the players, and communicate to players the standards and instructions of the coaches. You manage the relationship between the coaches and the players. So there's always, a bit of a divide between coaching and the staff and players, right? And really the best mediator between them is the captain. They know how to go to the coaches and talk, and they know how to communicate what the coaches expect and what their standards are to the players. They bridge that gap so there can be a good relationship between the coaching staff and the players. Because often players, sometimes they're immature, they don't know better, they don't know how to talk to a coach. The captain usually does. They're a more senior level player, right? A bit more experienced, a bit older. They've played this game for usually a longer time. They know how to talk to the coaches. Because of that, they can be a voice of wisdom for the younger players and help communicate the needs of the players to the coaches and communicate the standards of the coaches to the players and help both come together and foster a good relationship. And so this is my last point here, is control the team through composure. The team reflects the emotions of their captain. If the team is too intense, calm them down. And vice versa, if they are too calm, then raise the level of intensity for your team. Either way, use your own composure to set the tone and mood of the team for what the match needs from you. Because, the intensity of the match, right, often shifts. Sometimes you can have all the momentum, and because of that, you need to capitalize off that momentum and be intense in order to get those goals. But maybe, you're sitting 3-1, right? You can slow it down. So there's really no point if you're up by 2, maybe it's, 65th, 70th minute, right? You don't really need to be intense and try to keep hammering away. That's going to increase risk, which can lead to more overturns, which can lead to conceding goals, right? Instead, calm your team down. They don't have to be so intense at that point in the game. So change your own composure, your own communication to be more calm, to calm the team down so they can focus in on locking down defensively to stop the team from catching up. And again, Neuer, one of my favorite captains, he has this point perfectly, right? So with Neuer, he sets the tone of the team by using calm body language and communicates to his team in a way that calms them down, keeps them calm, keeps them focused, which in certain areas of the game can be very important and is needed, and the captain has to be the one to initiate that. And then sometimes, Neuer will amplify his own energy to amplify the energy and intensity of his own team, right? A lot of times he's calm. He communicates calmly, right? He keeps the team focused and in control. But there's sometimes where he'll get angry or intense with his team. Why? Because he needs to amplify the energy that his team has on the field. Maybe they're down by 1, so now they need to play more intense. They can't be calm and slow. They need to be fast and intense. And it just comes down to understanding what is needed out of your team and what is needed out of you in order to win the game. Right? So like I said, there's many different captains. I was a captain myself for my last year of club. I spent years, studying the captains, playing under good captains, bad captains. And then when I became a captain myself, a lot of these lessons I learned. And while my team wasn't always, didn't always win, because truth is, a lot of times it just comes down to skill gaps between, yourself and opponents. But one thing, my team did have was we always had good communication with each other. We were always, transparent, and we fostered very good team chemistry on and off the field. And like I said, I've been on other teams where I wasn't the captain, someone else was the captain, and sometimes they're good captains, sometimes they're bad, and we just had bad team chemistry, and it led to a lot of losses, right? Captains are very, very important. They're monumental for their teams. Why do you think Argentina won the World Cup? Messi was their captain, and those players fought hard, very hard, for their captain. Why? Because Messi's done so much for Argentina, and those players wanted to help him get that World Cup, right? And get that World Cup for Argentina. Why? Because he was a great leader, right? And he inspired the team. That's how they were able to rise to the occasion and win the World Cup. Germany, when they won, their captain, again, fostered great team environment, great team chemistry. Guess what? Not only did they dominate Brazil, but they beat Argentina in the final. And guess what? They won, right? And in both instances, the captains have been huge for those teams and their performances in those tournaments to win those trophies. So to close out this video, captains, like I said, are monumental. If you want to be a good captain, these are the lessons that you need to learn and add to your career, to how you carry yourself on the field, right? In your leadership. If you want to be seen as a captain for your next season, you have to show that you are worthy of being the leader, that you can show leadership whether you're a captain or not. Because to be honest, in the in younger age groups, with youth academies, all that, a lot of these captains, they're terrible. They're terrible. So the standards are already low. So if you can take elements from this video and apply them to your career and your leadership on and off the pitch for your team, you're going to be miles ahead of the other captains, and you will show your coaches that you are the right leader, that you can lead your team. Whether you're the captain or not, you are the leader for the team, right? And these are sort of the basic points that you need to have in order to show yourself as the leader for that team.